The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets of Bath as Princess and's black Bentley pulled up outside the modest brick building that housed Rosemary's fine lingerie atelier. The establishment, tucked between a traditional tea shop and an antique bookstore, had been operating quietly for over 30 years, creating exquisite undergarments for discerning women across Britain and Europe. Sarah Middleton, the workshop's current owner and master seamstress, stood nervously by the window, adjusting her simple navy dress for the 100th time that morning. She had inherited the business from her mentor, Rosemary Fletcher, just 5 years earlier, and never in her wildest dreams had she imagined that a member of the royal family would grace her small establishment with their presence. The invitation had come through official channels 3 weeks prior. The Princess Royal's private secretary had contacted Sarah directly, explaining that Her Royal Highness was interested in learning about traditional British craftsmanship and supporting small businesses that maintained time-honored techniques. The visit was to be informal, educational, and, most importantly, private. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed down her graying hair, pulled back into a neat bun. At 53, she had spent her entire adult life perfecting the art of creating intimate apparel, learning every stitch, every technique, every secret that went into making garments that were both beautiful and functional. Her workshop employed 12 skilled seamstresses, each trained in methods that had been passed down through generations. The security detail had arrived an hour earlier, discreetly checking every corner of the building. Detective Inspector James Morrison, Princess Anne's longtime protection officer, had worked with Sarah to ensure the visit would proceed smoothly while maintaining the workshop's normal operations. The other employees had been briefed but were encouraged to continue their work as usual. Princess Anne stepped out of the vehicle with her characteristic brisk efficiency. At 73, she moved with the same purposeful energy that had defined her public life for decades. Dressed in a tailored charcoal wool coat over a cream silk blouse and navy skirt, she carried herself with a no-nonsense dignity that had made her one of the most respected members of the royal family. "Mrs. Middleton," the Princess Royal said warmly, extending her hand as Sarah rushed to greet her at the entrance. "Thank you for accommodating this visit. I've been looking forward to learning about your work." Sarah curtsied slightly, still amazed by the surreal nature of the moment. "Your Royal Highness, the honor is entirely ours. Please come in." The workshop's main floor buzzed with quiet activity. 6 seamstresses sat at antique Singer's sewing machines, their skilled fingers guiding delicate silk and lace through precise stitches. The sound of the machines created a rhythmic hum that had become the heartbeat of the establishment. Bolts of fabric in various textures and colors lined the walls, from the finest French silk to imported Italian lace, each material carefully selected for its quality and beauty. Princess Anne paused near the cutting tables, where patterns were laid out with mathematical precision. "These designs are quite intricate," she observed, studying a pattern for a corset that featured dozens of individual pieces. "Each piece requires approximately 40 hours of work from start to finish," Sarah explained, her nervousness beginning to fade as she discussed her passion. "We use techniques that haven't changed significantly in over a century. Hand-stitched French seams, steel boning shaped individually for each client, and silk ribbons that we dye ourselves to achieve the exact shade our customers request." The Princess Royal picked up a partially completed brassiere, examining the delicate embroidery that adorned the cups. The floral pattern had been stitched entirely by hand using silk thread in 3 shades of pink, creating a subtle gradient effect that would be barely visible when worn, but added an element of luxury that set the piece apart from mass-produced alternatives. "This is extraordinary craftsmanship," Princess Anne said, turning the garment to study the construction. "How did you learn these techniques?" Sarah smiled, remembering her early days as an apprentice. "I started here when I was 16, straight from school." Rosemary Fletcher, the original owner, believed in the old apprenticeship system. "I spent 2 years just learning to cut fabric properly, another year mastering basic stitches, and then gradually worked my way up to the more complex techniques." They moved toward the fitting area, where Margaret Holmes, the workshop's senior seamstress at 68, was working on a commission that had taken her 3 months to complete. The customer, a wealthy American socialite, had requested a complete trousseau for her daughter's wedding, including 12 custom pieces ranging from simple daily wear to elaborate bridal lingerie. Margaret has been with us for 42 years, Sarah said proudly. She's trained most of the seamstresses who work here now. Margaret looked up from her work, setting aside the delicate chemise she was hand-hemming with invisible stitches. "Your Royal Highness," she said with a respectful nod. "I was just finishing the French seams on this piece. Would you care to see how they're constructed?" Princess Anne leaned in, genuinely interested in the technical details. Margaret demonstrated how the seam was sewn twice, first with wrong sides together, then with right sides together, completely encasing the raw edges and creating a finish that was both beautiful and durable. The technique required precision and patience, but the result was a seam that would last for decades without fraying or coming apart. "We don't use any synthetic materials in our custom pieces," Margaret explained, running her fingers along the silk. "Natural fibers breathe with the body, last longer, and feel completely different against the skin. Our clients often tell us they can't go back to commercial lingerie after experiencing what we create here." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Emma Watson, the workshop's youngest employee at 24. She approached carrying a tray with tea and homemade biscuits, her hands steady despite the importance of the moment. Emma had joined the workshop 18 months earlier after completing a fashion design degree, but she had quickly discovered that academic training couldn't replace the hands-on knowledge that could only be gained through daily practice. Emma is learning our traditional techniques while also bringing fresh perspectives to the business, Sarah explained as they settled around a small table near the window. She's been working on updating our pattern systems and helping us document some of the methods that have only been passed down verbally until now. Princess Anne accepted a cup of tea, noting the delicate china that matched the workshop's attention to detail. "That's important work. Too many traditional skills are being lost because they're not properly recorded." Emma blushed at the praise, but found her voice. "We're creating a comprehensive manual that includes not just the techniques, but the reasoning behind each method. Why certain stitches work better with specific fabrics, how to adjust patterns for different body types, even the proper way to store and care for the tools we use." The Princess Royal was clearly impressed by the young woman's dedication to preserving traditional knowledge while adapting it for modern needs. "Have you considered partnering with educational institutions? This type of practical knowledge could be invaluable for students studying fashion or textile arts." Sarah's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "We've had a few inquiries from colleges, but we weren't sure how to structure such a partnership. Most of our knowledge is so hands-on, it's difficult to teach in a traditional classroom setting. Perhaps apprenticeships or intensive workshops," Princess Anne suggested. "I've seen successful programs in other traditional crafts where masters work directly with small groups of students over extended periods." The conversation was flowing naturally now, with the initial formality giving way to genuine discussion about craftsmanship, business challenges, and the importance of maintaining traditional skills in a rapidly changing world. Princess Anne's reputation for being down-to-earth and genuinely interested in the work people did was proving to be well-deserved. From their position near the window, they could see pedestrians occasionally stopping to peer through the glass, though most were simply curious about the unusual security presence rather than recognizing the royal visitor inside. Sarah had deliberately kept the visit quiet, not wanting to turn the educational tour into a media circus that would disrupt the workshop's peaceful atmosphere. "Tell me about your client base," Princess Anne said, sipping her tea. "I imagine it's quite specialized." Sarah nodded, setting down her cup. "We have clients from all over the world now, though most of our business is still local. Word of mouth is our primary source of new customers. Women who've experienced our work tend to tell their friends, and many of our clients have been coming to us for decades." Margaret rejoined the conversation, wiping her hands on a soft cloth. "We have mothers who bring their daughters for their first custom pieces when they come of age. We've fitted 3 generations of some families, each with their own preferences and requirements. The personal relationship is crucial, Sarah added. Creating intimate apparel requires trust and understanding. Our clients need to feel comfortable discussing their needs, their bodies, their preferences. We often become friends with the women we serve, learning about their lives, their special occasions, their changing needs over time. Princess and nodded thoughtfully. That personal touch is becoming increasingly rare in retail. Everything is moving toward mass production and online sales. We've resisted that trend, Sarah admitted. We do have a website now, mainly for information, but we require in-person consultations for all custom work. You simply can't create properly fitted intimate apparel without precise measurements and understanding how a woman moves, how she carries herself, what makes her feel confident and comfortable. Emma spoke up again, her confidence growing. We've been documenting some of the stories our clients have shared over the years. Women who felt beautiful in their own skin for the first time after wearing our pieces. Brides who wore great-grandmother's pearls with our custom lingerie on their wedding day. Cancer survivors who needed specially designed pieces that accommodated their changing bodies. Those stories are as valuable as the craftsmanship itself, Princess and observed. They represent the human impact of what you do here. The tour continued to the design area, where sketches and pattern pieces covered large tables. Some designs were traditional, based on patterns that hadn't changed in decades, while others showed innovative adaptations that incorporated modern understanding of body mechanics and comfort. We work closely with a few designers who specialize in period reproduction, Sarah explained, showing Princess in a pattern for a Victorian-era corset that was being created for a museum exhibition. Historical accuracy requires understanding not just how these garments looked, but how they functioned, how they affected posture and movement. The Princess Royal examined the pattern pieces, clearly fascinated by the complexity involved. This is like architectural engineering applied to clothing. Exactly, Sarah laughed. The mathematics involved in creating a properly fitted corset rivals anything you'd see in structural design. Every curve, every angle, every point of stress must be calculated and reinforced appropriately. They were joined by Patricia Williams, the workshop's pattern maker, who had been quietly working at a table covered with brown paper and measuring tools. At 45, Patricia had the focused intensity of someone who understood that millimeters could mean the difference between comfort and misery for the women who would wear the finished garments. Patricia creates all our original patterns, Sarah said. It's a skill that takes years to master, understanding how fabric drapes, how bodies move, how to translate two-dimensional measurements into three-dimensional garments that fit perfectly. Patricia looked up from her work, pencil still in hand. Your Royal Highness, I was just working on a pattern for a client with scoliosis. Standard commercial sizing simply doesn't work for women with spinal curvatures, but with careful pattern adjustments and strategic seaming, we can create pieces that provide proper support while being completely comfortable. Princess and leaned over the table, studying the modifications Patricia had made to a basic brassiere pattern. The adjustments were subtle, but significant, accounting for the uneven positioning of the shoulders and ribcage that resulted from the spinal condition. This level of customization must be quite expensive, the Princess Royal observed. It is, Sarah admitted. Our pieces typically cost 10 to 20 times what women would pay for department store alternatives. But our clients understand they're purchasing something that will last for years, fit perfectly, and make them feel confident and beautiful every day they wear it. The discussion was interrupted by the gentle chime of the shop's clock, marking the halfway point of the scheduled visit. Princess Anne had been so engaged in learning about the technical aspects of the work that time had passed quickly. The seamstresses continued their work throughout the tour, the rhythmic sound of the machines providing a comforting background to the conversation. I'd like to see some of the historical pieces you mentioned earlier, Princess Anne said. Understanding how these techniques evolved could provide valuable context for preserving traditional craftsmanship. Sarah's face brightened with enthusiasm. We have a small collection upstairs that Rosemary assembled over the years. Some pieces date back to the 1890s, and each one tells a story about changing fashion, social expectations, and women's roles in society. As they prepared to head upstairs to the archive, Princess and paused to speak with several more seamstresses, asking about their training, their specialties, and their thoughts on the future of traditional craftsmanship. Each woman responded with obvious pride in her work and gratitude for the princess's genuine interest in learning about their skills. The visit was proving to be exactly what Sarah had hoped for, a meaningful exchange between someone who understood the value of traditional craftsmanship and artisans who dedicated their lives to preserving important skills. Princess Anne's questions were thoughtful and informed, revealing her appreciation for quality workmanship and her understanding of the challenges facing traditional businesses in the modern economy. The archive upstairs would provide another dimension to the discussion, offering glimpses into the evolution of women's intimate apparel and the social changes those garments reflected. Sarah looked forward to sharing these historical treasures with someone who would truly appreciate their significance beyond mere curiosity about vintage fashion. The narrow staircase leading to the workshop's archive creaked softly under their feet as Sarah led Princess into the upper floor. The space above had been converted into a combination storage area and historical collection, with climate-controlled cases housing garments that spanned more than a century of intimate apparel evolution. Sarah switched on the specialized lighting system that had been installed to protect the delicate fabrics from harmful UV rays. The room came alive with displays that told the story of women's undergarments from the restrictive Victorian era through the liberation movements of the 1960s and beyond. Rosemary began collecting these pieces in the 1970s, Sarah explained, opening the first display case. She believed that understanding the history of intimate apparel was essential to creating modern pieces that honor traditional craftsmanship while meeting contemporary needs. Princess Anne leaned in to examine a cream silk corset from 1895, its whalebone stays still rigid after more than a century. The garment was a masterpiece of construction, with hand-stitched seams so fine they were barely visible and steel grommets that showed no signs of rust or were despite their age. The level of skill required to create this is extraordinary, the Princess Royal observed, noting the intricate flossing that decorated the external seams. Every detail serves both functional and aesthetic purposes. Women in that era typically wore these for 12 to 14 hours daily, Sarah said, carefully lifting the corset to show its internal construction. The craftsmanship had to be perfect because a poorly made corset could cause serious health problems. The best corset makers were held in the same regard as master tailors. They moved to a case containing garments from the 1920s, when fashion underwent radical changes that reflected women's growing independence. A beaded brassiere from 1925 caught Princess Anne's attention, its Art Deco pattern created entirely from tiny glass beads sewn onto silk mesh. This represents such a dramatic shift from the Victorian pieces, the Princess Royal commented. The silhouette is completely different. The 1920s marked the first time women's undergarments were designed to flatten rather than enhance the natural bust line, Sarah explained. Fashion dictated a boyish figure, so intimate apparel had to adapt accordingly. This particular piece was worn by a young woman who worked as a typist in London. Her family donated it to us along with her diary entries, describing how liberating it felt to wear clothing that allowed full range of movement. Emma, who had joined them upstairs, carefully opened another case containing 1940s utility garments. During World War II, fabric rationing forced designers to become incredibly creative with minimal materials, she said, showing Princess Anne a brassiere constructed from parachute silk. Women would repurpose whatever materials they could find, and manufacturers had to meet the same functional requirements using half the fabric they'd previously used. The Princess Royal examined the ingenious construction, noting how the designer had achieved proper support using strategic seaming and minimal elastic. The resourcefulness is remarkable. Making something beautiful and functional with such limited resources requires true artistry. My own grandmother made undergarments during the war, Sarah added, pulling out a folder containing sketches and patterns. She'd unpick damaged stockings to harvest the elastic, then incorporate those small pieces into brassieres for herself and her neighbors. Nothing was wasted. The historical tour continued chronologically, with each decade represented by garments that reflected changing social attitudes, technological advances, and evolving understanding of women's bodies. A 1950s bullet bra demonstrated the era's emphasis on dramatic feminine silhouettes, while 1960s pieces showed the influence of youth culture and sexual liberation on intimate apparel design. The introduction of synthetic materials in the 1960s revolutionized the industry, Patricia Williams said, joining the group upstairs. Nylon, polyester, and spandex allowed for new construction techniques and fit possibilities that simply weren't achievable with natural fibers alone. Princess studied a 1960s bodysuit that incorporated early liquor technology. But you mentioned earlier that you still prefer natural fibers. Why maintain that preference when synthetic materials offer obvious advantages? Comfort and longevity, Sarah replied immediately. Synthetic materials may offer stretch and easy care, but they don't breathe with the body the way natural fibers do. Our clients often tell us they can wear our silk pieces for 12 hours without discomfort, while synthetic alternatives become unpleasant after just a few hours. There's also the environmental consideration, Emma added. Natural fibers biodegrade, while synthetic materials persist in landfills for decades. Our clients appreciate that their custom pieces are made from sustainable materials using traditional techniques that don't rely on petroleum-based products. The conversation was interrupted by Margaret's appearance at the top of the stairs, carrying a tea tray with fresh cups for everyone. I thought you might enjoy some refreshment while exploring the collection, she said, setting the tray on a small table near the window. As they sipped their tea, Princess continued examining the historical pieces, asking detailed questions about construction techniques, materials, and the social context that influenced design changes. Her questions revealed both genuine curiosity and impressive knowledge of historical fashion trends. I'm particularly interested in how intimate apparel reflects broader social changes, the Princess Royal said. These garments tell the story of women's evolving roles in society, perhaps better than any other category of clothing. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. You can trace women's liberation through their undergarments. From restrictive Victorian corsets that limited physical movement to supportive modern pieces that accommodate active lifestyles, intimate apparel has always reflected how society expected women to move through the world. They examined a case containing garments designed for specific activities, equestrian brassieres from the 1930s, swimming costumes that incorporated bust support, and exercise wear that predated modern athletic apparel by several decades. These specialized pieces show how women were gradually claiming space in activities traditionally reserved for men, Patricia observed. Creating appropriate undergarments was often the first step in making those activities accessible to women. Princess, and herself an accomplished equestrian who had competed in the Olympics, was particularly interested in the historical riding garments. The engineering required to create support for active pursuits while working within the constraints of period fashion must have been incredibly challenging. The women who designed and wore these pieces were pioneers, Sarah said with obvious admiration. They understood that having the right foundation garments could mean the difference between being able to participate in activities they loved or being sidelined by inadequate clothing. The tour continued to a section dedicated to wedding lingerie, featuring pieces spanning multiple decades and representing various cultural traditions. A 1920s trousseau displayed 12 hand-embroidered pieces that had taken a team of seamstresses 6 months to complete, while more recent pieces showed how modern brides balance tradition with personal style. Wedding lingerie represents some of our finest work, Sarah explained. Brides often commission pieces that incorporate family heirloom lace, fabric from a grandmother's wedding dress, or cultural symbols that reflect their heritage. Princess examined a recent creation that incorporated both English rose embroidery and Celtic knotwork, reflecting the bride's mixed heritage. The symbolism is beautifully integrated into the design. These pieces must hold enormous emotional significance for the women who wear them. We've had brides return years later to commission pieces for their own daughters, Margaret said. Sometimes they'll bring the original garments and ask us to create something that honors the family tradition while reflecting contemporary styling. The discussion turned to the challenges facing traditional craftspeople in the modern economy. Princess, who had long been an advocate for supporting British manufacturing and traditional skills, was keenly interested in understanding the obstacles Sarah's business faced. Competition for mass production must be significant, the Princess Royal observed. How do you maintain a viable business when consumers can purchase alternatives for a fraction of your prices? Sarah set down her teacup, choosing her words carefully. It's definitely challenging. We can't compete on price, so we have to demonstrate value in other ways. Quality, fit, durability, and personal service become our competitive advantages. We also focus on education, Emma added. Many women have never experienced properly fitted intimate apparel because they've only shopped for mass-produced items. Once they understand the difference custom work can make in their daily comfort and confidence, they become our most effective advocates. The environmental argument resonates with many customers too, Patricia noted. When a single custom piece lasts 10 times longer than commercial alternatives, the cost per wearing becomes quite reasonable. Plus, there's no waste from ill-fitting items that get discarded after minimal use. Princess nodded thoughtfully. Sustainability through quality rather than disposability. It's a compelling argument, particularly for consumers who are becoming more environmentally conscious. They moved to the final section of the archive, which showcased contemporary innovations that honored traditional techniques while meeting modern needs. Advanced pattern-making software allowed for unprecedented precision and fit, while new natural fiber blends offered improved durability without sacrificing comfort. This represents the future of traditional craftsmanship, Sarah said with evident pride. We're using technology to enhance our skills rather than replace them. Computer-aided pattern design allows us to achieve fits that would have been impossible using traditional methods alone. But the actual construction is still done by hand? Princess asked. Absolutely, Margaret confirmed. Machines can cut fabric and assist with basic stitching, but the skilled work that creates the perfect fit and beautiful finish still requires human hands and years of training. The Princess Royal spent several more minutes examining recent pieces that demonstrated the workshop's evolution while maintaining its core commitment to quality and traditional techniques. A custom-designed piece for a Paralympic athlete showcased how traditional skills could be adapted to meet highly specialized needs that mass production simply couldn't address. The innovation is remarkable, Princess said. You've found ways to preserve essential skills while adapting to contemporary requirements. That's exactly what we're trying to achieve, Sarah replied. We want to ensure these techniques survive and thrive rather than becoming museum pieces. Traditional craftsmanship has to remain relevant and responsive to modern needs if it's going to continue. As they prepared to return downstairs, Emma pulled out a thick binder containing documentation of their techniques and processes. This represents 3 years of work recording everything we do here, she said. Measurements, construction methods, finishing techniques, even the tools we use, and how to maintain them. Princess flipped through several pages, noting the detailed photographs and precise instructions. This is invaluable work. Have you considered making this available to educational institutions or craft organizations? We're exploring options, Sarah said. We want to ensure the information reaches people who will use it responsibly while protecting our business interests. Finding that balance is delicate. The historical tour had provided rich context for understanding not just the evolution of intimate apparel, but the broader story of women's changing roles in society. Princess Anne's questions and observations had demonstrated her appreciation for both the technical skill involved and the cultural significance of preserving traditional craftsmanship. As they descended the stairs back to the workshop floor, the rhythmic sound of sewing machines welcomed them back to the present-day reality of a thriving business that successfully bridged past and future. The visit was proving to be everything Sarah had hoped for. A meaningful exchange between someone who understood the importance of traditional skills and craftspeople who had dedicated their lives to preserving and evolving those skills. The afternoon portion of the visit would focus on the actual production process, giving Princess and hands-on experience with the techniques she'd been learning about. Sarah looked forward to showing the Princess Royal how traditional methods were being adapted for contemporary applications, demonstrating that preservation of craftsmanship could coexist successfully with innovation and business sustainability. Returning to the main workshop floor, Princess was immediately drawn to a large cutting table where Julia Chun, the workshop's newest seamstress, was laying out pattern pieces on midnight blue silk. The fabric shimmered under the natural light streaming through the tall windows, its surface creating subtle waves of color as Julia smoothed each piece into position. "This commission is for a client's anniversary celebration," Sarah explained, watching as Julia carefully positioned each pattern piece to maximize the fabric's natural drape. She requested something elegant, but comfortable for a weekend getaway with her husband of 30 years. Princess observed the meticulous process of pattern placement, noting how Julia considered not just the most economical use of fabric, but also how the grain lines would affect the finished garment's fit and movement. "The planning required for each piece must be extensive," the Princess Royal commented. "Every decision at this stage affects the final product," Julia replied, looking up from her work. "The direction of the fabric grain determines how the piece will stretch and move with the body. If I position these pieces incorrectly, even by a few degrees, the finished garment might bind or pull in uncomfortable ways." Julia demonstrated the difference between cutting pieces along the bias versus the straight grain, showing how the same fabric could have completely different drape characteristics depending on the orientation. Princess handled both samples, immediately feeling the distinction in how they moved and stretched. "The technical knowledge required is remarkable," the Princess Royal observed. "This goes far beyond simply following a pattern." "That's exactly right," Sarah agreed. "Pattern pieces are just starting points. Each fabric behaves differently, and every client's body is unique. Our seamstresses must understand how to modify construction techniques based on dozens of variables." They moved to Margaret's workstation, where she was hand-stitching French seams on a delicate chemise made from ivory silk charmeuse. Her fingers moved with the practiced efficiency of decades of experience, each stitch perfectly, even despite the lack of visible guidelines on the fabric. "Would you like to try a few stitches?" Margaret offered, holding up a practice piece of silk with pins marking the seam line. "The technique takes years to master, but the basic motion is quite satisfying once you understand the rhythm." Princess, known for her practical approach to learning, immediately accepted the offer. Margaret showed her how to hold the needle, how to guide the thread through the silk without puckering the delicate fabric, and how to maintain consistent tension that would create invisible stitches from the right side of the garment. The Princess Royal's first attempts produced noticeably uneven stitches, but she persevered with characteristic determination. "This requires extraordinary patience and concentration," she said, focusing intently on matching Margaret's demonstration. "I have tremendous respect for anyone who can maintain this level of precision for hours at a time." "The meditative quality is part of what draws many of us to this work," Margaret explained, guiding Princess's hand to achieve the proper angle. "There's something deeply satisfying about creating something beautiful through careful, methodical work. Each stitch brings you closer to a finished piece that will bring joy to someone's daily life." After several attempts, Princess managed to produce a short seam that, while clearly the work of a beginner, showed improvement from her initial efforts. "I can see why proper training takes years," she said, examining her work critically. "The muscle memory required to achieve consistent results must be developed gradually." Emma approached carrying a partially constructed brassiere that showcased several different construction techniques in various stages of completion. "We often use pieces like this for training," she explained. "Each section demonstrates a different skill level, from basic seaming through advanced shaping techniques." Princess and studied the teaching sample with obvious fascination. The left cup showed basic construction with machine-stitched seams, while the right cup featured hand-applied lace trim and internal structure that created perfect shaping without visible support mechanisms. The internal engineering is extraordinary, the Princess Royal observed, feeling the hidden support structure. How do you achieve this level of support while maintaining such a natural appearance? Patricia Williams, who had created the teaching sample, joined the group to explain the construction process. The secret is in layering different techniques, she said, pointing to various elements of the design. Channeled seaming provides structure, strategic placement of elastic offers stretch where needed, and carefully shaped pieces create the desired silhouette without obvious padding or hardware. She demonstrated how traditional corsetry techniques have been adapted for modern comfort requirements. We use many of the same principles that created those Victorian corsets we saw upstairs, but applied with lighter materials and modified patterns that work with natural body mechanics rather than fighting against them. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Eleanor Pemberton, a longtime client who had come for a fitting appointment. At 78, Mrs. Pemberton had been purchasing custom lingerie from the workshop for over 2 decades, and her presence provided Princess and with an opportunity to observe the personal consultation process that was central to the business. Mrs. Pemberton, Sarah said warmly, I'd like you to meet our special visitor today. This is Her Royal Highness Princess, and Mrs. Pemberton, elegantly dressed in a lilac wool suit with pearls, curtsied gracefully despite her age. Your Royal Highness, what a delightful surprise. I hope you're enjoying learning about Sarah's wonderful work. Very much indeed, Princess and replied warmly. Mrs. Middleton tells me you've been a client for many years. Perhaps you could share your perspective on the value of custom work. Oh, my dear, it's transformed my life, Mrs. Pemberton said with enthusiasm. I spent 60 years wearing ill-fitting undergarments because I simply didn't know better existed. When my daughter brought me here after my husband passed away, it was like discovering a whole new world of comfort and confidence. Sarah led them to the private fitting area, a comfortable room with warm lighting, full-length mirrors, and upholstered seating. Mrs. Pemberton continued her story as they walked. You see, I lost quite a bit of weight after Harold died, and nothing fit properly anymore. The department store clerks tried to help, but mass-produced items simply couldn't accommodate my changing body. Mrs. Pemberton's experience is quite common, Sarah explained to Princess Anne. Women's bodies change throughout their lives due to age, health conditions, pregnancies, or simply natural fluctuations. Custom work allows us to adapt to those changes rather than expecting bodies to conform to standardized sizes. In the fitting room, Mrs. Pemberton showed Princess and several pieces she was wearing that had been created at the workshop over the past year. Each piece demonstrated different solutions to specific comfort and fit challenges that arose from her age and body changes. This brassiere, Mrs. Pemberton said, indicating a beautifully constructed piece in soft pink silk, provides support without the underwire that was causing me pain. Sarah designed it with channeled seaming that does the same job while being completely comfortable for all-day wear. Princess Anne examined the construction, noting how traditional corsetry techniques have been adapted to create support through careful shaping and strategic seaming rather than rigid hardware. The engineering is remarkable, but it appears so simple and elegant. That's the mark of true craftsmanship, Mrs. Pemberton said. The most complex solutions often appear effortless when executed properly. Sarah has created pieces for me that solve problems I didn't even realize I had. The fitting session that followed gave Princess an insight into the consultation process that was fundamental to the workshop's success. Sarah took precise measurements, discussed Mrs. Pemberton's lifestyle and comfort preferences, and examined how existing pieces were wearing and fitting. We typically see clients every 6 to 8 months for adjustments or new pieces, Sarah explained. Bodies change, preferences evolve, and garments wear differently over time. Maintaining the relationship allows us to anticipate needs and make modifications before problems arise. Mrs. Pemberton nodded enthusiastically. It's like having a personal relationship with someone who truly understands the importance of proper foundation garments. Sarah knows my body, my preferences, and my lifestyle. When she suggests modifications or new pieces, I trust her judgment completely. The consultation revealed the depth of knowledge required to serve clients effectively. Sarah noted that Mrs. Pemberton had been favoring her left side slightly, probably due to a minor hip issue, and suggested adjustments to distribute weight more evenly. She also recommended a modification to the strap construction on one piece to reduce pressure on Mrs. Pemberton's shoulders. These observations come from years of experience working with women's bodies, Sarah explained to Princess, and you learn to see subtle changes in posture, movement, and where patterns that indicate developing issues before they become painful problems. After Mrs. Pemberton's consultation concluded and she departed with obvious satisfaction, Princess and spent time with each of the seamstresses, learning about their individual specialties and career paths. The diversity of backgrounds and expertise represented in the small workshop was impressive. Jessica Torres, originally from Spain, had joined the workshop 3 years earlier after training in traditional Spanish corsetry techniques. She specialized in pieces that incorporated cultural elements from various traditions, creating fusion designs that honored multiple heritage influences while maintaining the workshop's quality standards. I came here because I wanted to learn British techniques to complement my Spanish training, Jessica explained, showing Princess in a piece that combined English embroidery traditions with Spanish construction methods. Each culture has developed different solutions to the same basic challenges. Learning multiple approaches makes me a better craftsperson. Rachel Murphy, who had been with the workshop for 8 years, specialized in pieces designed for specific medical needs. She worked closely with mastectomy patients, women with chronic pain conditions, and clients who needed specialized support due to various health challenges. This work requires sensitivity as well as technical skill, Rachel explained. Many of our medical clients come to us during difficult times in their lives. Creating pieces that help them feel beautiful and confident again is incredibly rewarding, but it requires understanding their emotional needs as well as their physical requirements. Princess and spoke with each seamstress about their training, their specialties, and their views on the future of traditional craftsmanship. The conversations revealed a group of women passionate about their work and committed to preserving skills that might otherwise disappear in an increasingly automated world. The afternoon was advancing when Sarah suggested they observe the final fitting process for a bridal client who was collecting her completed trousseau. The bride-to-be, Catherine Morrison, had commissioned 8 pieces ranging from everyday wear to elaborate wedding night lingerie, all coordinated to complement her wedding dress and honeymoon wardrobe. Bridal work represents our most comprehensive service, Sarah explained as they prepared for Catherine's arrival. We typically begin consultations 6 months before the wedding, allowing time for multiple fittings as the bride's body changes due to wedding stress, diet changes, or increased exercise. Catherine arrived with her mother and sister, clearly excited about collecting her completed pieces. The family's joy and anticipation provided Princess and with another perspective on the emotional significance of the workshop's creations. Your Royal Highness, Catherine said after the introductions, I'm so honored that you're here on such an important day for me. These pieces are going to be part of the most special moments of my life. The fitting session that followed showcased the workshop's ability to create garments that were both technically perfect and emotionally meaningful. Each piece told a story, incorporated personal elements, and reflected Catherine's individual style while maintaining the timeless elegance that characterized the workshop's aesthetic. Princess and observed how the pieces worked together as a coordinated collection while serving different functional and emotional purposes. The everyday pieces prioritize comfort and durability, while the special occasion items emphasize beauty and romance without sacrificing fit or quality. This level of coordination and attention to detail is remarkable, the Princess Royal commented. Each piece serves its purpose while contributing to a cohesive whole. That's exactly what we aim for, Sarah replied. A woman's intimate wardrobe should work seamlessly with her lifestyle while making her feel confident and beautiful every day. As Catherine's fitting concluded and she departed with her carefully packaged trousseau, princess, and reflected on the day's experiences. The visit had provided comprehensive insight into a traditional craft that remained vital and relevant in the modern world, demonstrating how skilled artisans could preserve important techniques while adapting to contemporary needs and values. As the late afternoon sun slanted through the workshop windows, casting golden light across the cutting tables and sewing stations, princess and settled into a comfortable chair near the main work area for what had become an impromptu roundtable discussion with the entire team. The formal nature of the royal visit had gradually dissolved into genuine conversation between craftspeople who shared common values about quality, tradition, and meaningful work. "I'm curious about your thoughts on the future," Princess said, addressing the group of seamstresses who had gathered around her. "How do you see traditional craftsmanship evolving in the coming decades?" Margaret Holmes, as the senior member of the team, spoke first. "I've seen enormous changes during my 42 years here," she said thoughtfully. "When I started, we relied entirely on hand-drawn patterns and traditional tools. Now we use computer-aided design for precision fitting, but the actual construction methods haven't changed significantly. Technology has become our ally rather than our replacement," added Patricia Williams. "We can achieve greater accuracy in measurements and pattern development, but the skilled handwork that creates the final product remains irreplaceable." Emma Watson, representing the youngest generation of craftspeople, offered a different perspective. "My generation of makers faces unique challenges. We're competing for attention with fast fashion and instant gratification, but we're also part of a growing movement of people who value authenticity, sustainability, and meaningful consumption." Princess Anne nodded, clearly interested in this generational perspective. "How do you reach consumers who might not understand the value of traditional craftsmanship?" "Education is crucial," Emma replied. "Many women have never experienced properly fitted intimate apparel because they've only purchased mass-produced items. We use social media, workshops, and partnerships with fashion schools to demonstrate what's possible when garments are created specifically for individual bodies." Julia Chun spoke up from her cutting table, where she was still working on the anniversary commission. "The environmental argument resonates strongly with younger consumers. When they understand that one custom piece can replace multiple cheap items over its lifetime, the value proposition becomes clear." "There's also the wellness aspect," added Rachel Murphy, who specialized in medical applications. "As people become more aware of how clothing affects their physical and mental well-being, they're more willing to invest in pieces that truly support their bodies and make them feel confident." Sarah, who had been listening to her team's perspectives, addressed the broader question of preserving traditional skills. "We're not trying to turn back the clock or reject modern innovations. We're demonstrating that traditional techniques remain relevant when they're applied thoughtfully to contemporary needs." Princess Anne asked about the challenges of finding and training new craftspeople. "Are young people interested in learning these skills, given the time investment required?" "We get far more applications than we can accept," Sarah replied. "The challenge isn't interest, it's finding people with the patience and attention to detail required for this level of work. We typically screen 50 applicants to find one who has the temperament and aptitude for traditional craftsmanship." Jessica Torres shared her experience as someone who had sought out traditional training. "I specifically chose to learn these skills because I wanted to create something meaningful with my hands. The slow fashion movement has created demand for artisans who can offer alternatives to mass production." The conversation turned to the broader impact of the workshop's work on the local community. Princess Anne was interested in understanding how small traditional businesses contributed to economic sustainability and community character. "We source materials from suppliers across Britain whenever possible," Sarah explained. "Our silk comes from a mill in Scotland that's been operating for over a century, our English cotton from traditional weavers in Lancashire, and our wool from small farms in the Cotswolds that practice sustainable agriculture. The ripple effect is significant, added Margaret. Every piece we create supports not just our workshop, but traditional suppliers, specialty hardware manufacturers, and even the local services we use. Our success contributes to preserving entire supply chains of specialized materials and skills. Princess and was particularly interested in the workshop's role as an unofficial training ground for traditional skills. You mentioned earlier that some of your former apprentices have started their own businesses. How do you balance training future competitors with maintaining your own success? Sarah smiled at the question. We view it as stewardship rather than competition. The more skilled craftspeople working to preserve these techniques, the better chance they have of surviving. Our former apprentices often specialize in different areas or serve different markets, so we're expanding the field rather than simply duplicating what we do here. One of our former apprentices now focuses exclusively on historical reproduction for museums and period films, Margaret added. Another specializes in adaptive clothing for people with disabilities. They're using skills learned here to address needs we couldn't serve effectively ourselves. The discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Helena Richardson, a textile historian from the University of Bath who had been documenting traditional British crafts for a comprehensive academic study. Dr. Richardson had arranged to photograph some of the workshop's techniques for her research, and her presence provided another perspective on the historical importance of the skills being preserved. Dr. Richardson is helping us document our methods for academic archives, Sarah explained to Princess Anne. Her research focuses on how traditional crafts adapt to remain relevant in contemporary society. Dr. Richardson, clearly excited to meet Princess, and shared her findings about the broader context of traditional craftsmanship in modern Britain. What Sarah and her team represent is part of a larger renaissance in traditional skills. Young people are increasingly interested in learning crafts that connect them to cultural heritage while offering alternatives to mass-produced goods. The economic impact is significant too, Dr. Richardson continued. Traditional craft businesses often demonstrate greater resilience during economic downturns because they serve specialized markets and maintain strong customer relationships that aren't easily disrupted by broader economic trends. Princess Anne asked about the international interest in British traditional crafts. Do you see demand from other countries for these skills and products? Absolutely, Dr. Richardson replied. British traditional craftsmanship has an excellent international reputation. Sarah's workshop receives commissions from clients across Europe, North America, and even Asia. There's particular interest from countries where traditional skills were lost during rapid industrialization. The conversation revealed the global significance of preserving local traditions. The workshop served as both a living museum of traditional techniques and a thriving business that proved those techniques could remain economically viable in a modern world. As the afternoon progressed, Princess Anne spent individual time with each seamstress, asking about their personal journeys into traditional craftsmanship and their views on its future. These one-on-one conversations provided deeper insight into the motivations and experiences of people who had chosen to dedicate their careers to preserving traditional skills. The visit culminated with a demonstration of collaborative work, where the entire team came together to show how complex pieces required multiple specialists working in coordination. They used a partially completed corset commission to demonstrate how pattern making, cutting, construction, and finishing each required different expertise levels, and how the seamstresses supported each other throughout the creation process. This collaborative approach is essential for maintaining quality standards, Sarah explained as the team worked together seamlessly. Each person contributes their strongest skills while learning from colleagues who specialize in different areas. Princess Anne observed how knowledge was shared organically during the collaborative work, with experienced seamstresses mentoring newer team members through subtle guidance and encouragement rather than formal instruction. The apprenticeship tradition continues naturally in this environment, the Princess Royal noted. Knowledge transfers through daily practice rather than classroom learning. Exactly, Margaret agreed. We found that traditional apprenticeship methods work better than formal training programs for this type of work. Skills develop gradually through repeated practice under the guidance of experienced craftspeople. As the visit neared its conclusion, Sarah presented Princess and with a small gift, a hand-embroidered handkerchief created by the workshop team as a commemorative piece. The handkerchief featured delicate royal blue embroidery incorporating roses and thistles, executed with the same attention to detail that characterized all the workshop's creations. "This is beautiful," Princess said, examining the intricate needlework. "The craftsmanship is exquisite. Thank you for this thoughtful gesture." The presentation provided an opportunity for final reflections on the day's experiences. Princess addressed the assembled team with obvious warmth and respect for their dedication to traditional craftsmanship. "What I've witnessed here today represents the best of British manufacturing tradition," the Princess Royal said. "You've demonstrated that traditional skills can thrive when they're applied with intelligence, creativity, and genuine commitment to excellence." She continued, "The personal relationships you maintain with your clients, the attention to individual needs, and the quality of your work create value that simply cannot be replicated by mass production. You're not just preserving historical techniques, you're proving they remain relevant and necessary in the modern world." Sarah, speaking on behalf of her team, expressed gratitude for the Princess Royal's visit and genuine interest in their work. "Your presence here today validates the importance of what we do. Having someone of your stature recognize the value of traditional craftsmanship encourages us to continue growing and evolving while maintaining our commitment to excellence." The formal conclusion of the visit included presentations of several publications about traditional British crafts, including Dr. Richardson's recent academic paper on adaptive traditional techniques and a beautifully illustrated book featuring photographs of the workshop's historical collection. As Princess prepared to depart, she spent final moments with each team member, offering personal words of encouragement and expressing genuine appreciation for their individual contributions to preserving important cultural traditions. The black Bentley waited outside as evening shadows lengthened across the cobblestone street. Princess departure drew small crowds of curious onlookers who had noticed the security presence throughout the day, but the visit had been conducted with a dignity and privacy that allowed for genuine learning and meaningful exchange. Standing in the doorway of her workshop, Sarah watched the royal car disappear down the narrow street, still somewhat amazed by the day's events. The visit had exceeded all expectations, providing validation for the work they did while offering new perspectives on how traditional craftsmanship could continue evolving to meet contemporary needs. The workshop would return to its normal rhythm the following day, but the impact of Princess Anne's visit would resonate for years to come. The Princess Royal's genuine interest in their work and her thoughtful questions had reinforced the team's conviction that they were doing important work worthy of preservation and continued development. More than just a ceremonial royal visit, the day had been a meaningful exchange between craftspeople who understood the value of excellence, tradition, and innovation working together to create something beautiful and lasting. The experience had reminded everyone present why traditional skills matter and how they contribute to both cultural heritage and contemporary well-being. As twilight settled over Bath, the workshop returned to its peaceful evening routine, but the memory of the day would inspire continued dedication to the demanding but rewarding work of preserving traditional craftsmanship for future generations while serving the needs of women who valued quality, beauty, and perfect fit in their most intimate garments.